I hear a cat purring.
Yeah, that's Charles.
Not me.
It's fine. I think if it makes it into the episode, it's very poetic. We've been talking about cats so many times.
Hello and welcome, and thank you for joining us again for another episode of SaaS Showdown. My name is Colin McCarthy, and once again, I'm joined by
Rose Layton.
And hello, Rose. Great to see you again. And today,
Hey, Colin.
we are going to be talking to our dear friend, and we're going to ask him how a SaaS manager managed SaaS in a SaaS management platform. Brian.
Okay, so
SaaS management platform, SaaS manager manage SaaS in a SaaS management platform.
How many SaaS could a SaaS manager manage if SaaS manager could manage
Exactly.
platforms?
Thank you.
Yeah,
that was good. Our friend Brian here we've been friends with you for how long is it? Like 3 years, 4 years?
Around that.
Yeah.
I feel like I was in the community before I worked at Better Cloud, which is where I think I met both of you probably in earnestly for the first time. But so I was at Better Cloud for about 5 years, so probably shortly after I started.
And that's where you manage SaaS.
I didn't even meet Colin in person until 2 years ago.
July or September of 21, or was it 22? Yeah.
Really?
Something like that.
No.
Yeah, it was.
No.
It was the start of the tech dinners.
You didn't go to Altitude. You didn't go to Altitude in San Francisco.
No, I didn't go to Altitude in San Francisco. I did go to Denver and I went to Austin, but as Austin as a customer. And
so that means we've never met in person.
San Francisco.
I could have sworn we had. I just watched too many episodes of the SaaS Up Show. I feel like I know you.
We thank you. We thank you for increasing the dozens of views.
Yes, it's
we all get to like and comment on each other's pet projects.
It is available on syndication, and Brian will get those residual checks if people do watch it. So yes, check out the SaaS Ops show. But yeah, Brian, obviously a lot of experience being a SaaS Ops manager for a SaaS management company.
He's just gonna keep doing this the whole episode. He's just like, how many times can I say the word SaaS?
And there'll be a supercut with just SaaS management, like people do.
Our editor will just put a counter in the corner. I guess Brian, do you want to introduce yourself in your own words?
Sure. Yeah. I manage a lot of SaaS, but I'm Brian Farrell. Formerly the director of IT at Better Cloud, which is the leading SaaS management platform for managing your SaaS. And when I started, I was the IT manager coming in to manage SaaS management at the company making SaaS management platforms for IT people managing their SaaS.
Stop it! And you started pretty early in those days, right? Like how big were they when you joined?
Yeah, about 150 people, something like that. 100.
So it doubled in size at least while you were there. And what sort of changes do you remember seeing in the industry over that time that really took you by surprise?
Well, there was. I don't know. I think SaaS management was big, and SaaS management became big. I feel like it wasn't quite. A lot of the apps and tools that existed were very single SaaS. Like Better Cloud previously had Flash Panel, and it was just managing Google Workspace or Google Apps at the time. And GAM existed, GAM still exists, and all of these other tools for just like managing single SaaS apps. And then Better Cloud had released the new iteration of the platform, which was for multi-SaaS management. And that was like somewhat shortly before I started. And so, because I hadn't even used it as much, that part of the platform prior to starting, because like there were a number of new features. And then it really exploded. Like every year, I think it was, more and more companies had more and more average SaaS apps. Like it went from like the average company has, 50 SaaS apps to 80 to 100 to like 300.
Do you think
some
that
insane
companies started actually using more SaaS apps, or do you think we got better at counting them?
Ooh, that's an interesting question.
And shining the light into shadow.
Yeah.
Probably both.
Yeah,
because I feel like for every thing that somebody had an idea for, like digital whiteboarding, it starts out with one, and then there's quickly spawns a bunch of competitors, and then those sort of diversify and then start to overlap more, so that you end up buying both of them somehow, or like project management.
This is kind of, Colin and I actually talked about the proliferation of SaaS management platforms as it used to be just one category, SaaS, and now it's an umbrella of things, right? Like we've got SaaS. Last week we talked about, or 2 weeks ago we talked about SaaS security posture management.
Yep.
We've talked about spend management platforms, which are like their own sort of thing. There's I think the sort of core like automation kind of ones, automation focused ones.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I guess Okta Workflows is very much about automation, isn't it?
Automation
and their actions.
User lifecycle orchestration, I guess.
Yeah. I mean, it really, I think it exploded, and then I don't know. Some things haven't really changed, though. I think the trend of like consumerization of software is still a big one. Like people expect things to just sort of work. But then maybe I'm misspeaking here, because as now we're like, it just has to be things that these platforms have gotten like so complex that they've like sort of reverted back to the like enterprise level of complexity. And also the enterprise level of cost.
I think that's actually a really interesting observation. Yeah, because I think if we think, especially like one of the major players in the field, like if you consider Okta, right, one of the major players in the field, you can have, and people do have, dedicated teams to managing Okta, because it is so complex at this point that like,
and it's vital to a company's operation.
And it's vital to the infrastructure. Yeah. And it also, as you noted, it also has enterprise costs associated with it. Like it does, they have an a la carte pricing model, which like I don't agree with, but because of that, I think the cost can get really unwieldy if you want all the bells and whistles.
And like Slack is like a great example of that too. It starts out as like the disruptor. Everybody adopts it because it's super easy to use. It's super easy to use. It proliferates everywhere. It gets bigger and bigger. Gets bought by Salesforce. The company that's known for making user interfaces everyone loves. Sorry, wait. I'll have to walk this back in case they become a sponsor. But then even their billing model started as the fair billing model based on user counts, and then as I was like, as we had Slack longer and longer, and they were
they started to
further and further to enterprise. It's like now we just have a normal enterprise licensing agreement. Like it's just gone back to the same
Slack
thing
Grid
it was disrupting.
Slack
initially.
Grid is very expensive, but you need to get Slack Grid to get some of the features that you really need, like the domain capture. And you can actually have full access to or full control over, user signups.
I don't think Colin fed his cats today.
I did. I fed them before I came down here. I don't know why Charles is very bonded to me. He spends a lot of time on my lap and on video calls. So
I gave mine love before we podcasted, because I was like, please just go away. Sleep. Don't scratch at the door.
I just locked my dog out of the room, and he is bored and sleeping somewhere probably.
Okay, so I guess let's like pivot a little bit. So we talked about like your sort of experience of like being very close to the industry at that time. But like, I guess, what was it like for you as an IT person, kind of learning SaaS ops or like being pulled into SaaS ops? And like, what are some of like the great things that you learned being that close to SaaS management and SaaS management platforms?
Yeah, and the principles of it. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think things I learned, I mean, I don't know, it's a lot, but like, the more SaaS platforms you have, you're never going to be an expert at all of them. You need to automate every platform has its own admin console has its own security settings. A lot of them have analogs to each other. It's like domain capture exists, and a lot of them SSO exists, all of these nuts and bolts. But they all require a lot of specialized learning. And so but at the same time, IT teams smaller and smaller every day.
Yeah.
And so it takes some layer, some ability to automate things to be able to effectively manage all of those platforms. So that was like kind of the biggest one. Because when I came, I worked for a company, a music school education franchise called School of Rock. School of Rock is a Better Cloud customer, was a Better Cloud customer at least. I was familiar with the sphere of our SaaS platforms, and I was a G Suite administrator and an Okta admin and Slack and all of those things. But it was like a relatively small set. And then when I transitioned over, it's starting to get bigger and bigger where there's no way that you're going to have a size of a team where you would actually be experts in all of these. And so you need this sort of layer of abstraction to take care of a lot of those things for you, I think.
But who manages the layer of abstraction? The director.
SaaS managers. SaaS managers. Yeah. I don't know. And that's why I think all of these, you have to have really quality integrations in these management platforms that, you have to, I think I've seen a lot of companies as SaaS management becomes more mainstream and as automation and workflow tools, because it seems like everybody has like a workflow tool now. Like everybody's got
almost everybody. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. You have to. And
some form of lightweight automation is prevalent.
And they either call them a workflow or a playbook or a run book or something else.
Yeah. And they, there's a lot of things that there are many differentiators, but I think some of the key differentiators are the number of integrations, the types of integrations, the depth that you have with them, how well they're maintained. And if you have a product that has covers that swath or that the part of the industry that you care about too, because some of them are geared towards security, orchestration, response, some of them are geared to SaaS management, and now some of them are all just sort of the same thing. Then that makes your job a lot easier because I think you all talked about different ways to manage SaaS previously, and a lot of times when I was working at Better Cloud, a lot of prospects would say, "Well, we have an engineer who can build this thing." Which is true, but engineers are typically very specialized. They're focused on they know how to build the tool and they know how to solve the problem, but they're not necessarily thinking about how to maintain that solution, how to scale that solution, what happens when they leave or go on vacation, what happens if the different team takes over. Those are the types of things that I think SaaS management platforms and workflow tools and all those things come in handy.
I think that's true. In my experience with teams that have development capability, I find that they often don't think that things are going to break, and then one day they do. And they also they don't necessarily develop their capacity to monitor for things breaking. I know a while back, Atlassian did a massive update to the Jira APIs, and it broke a lot of stuff. Yeah, this was a few years ago, but it broke a lot of stuff, right? And I'm pretty sure they informed us before that happened. Yeah, we were customers, right? They must have informed us, right? But even so, when it happened, we were like, well, shoot, man.
So were you? Yeah, because you had built things yourself.
Yeah,
that were reliant on that, and you didn't have somebody who's just sitting there monitoring Jira's, release notes about their API.
You end up sending all that stuff to an IT notifications inbox somewhere, and maybe you catch it.
Yeah, that would be not only a full-time, but multiple full-time jobs. I had the experience because I've worked in places that had no development capabilities in-house, and I've worked in places that had development capabilities. And I've worked with incredibly talented engineers. And then I worked with incredibly talented engineers who took a vacation. And I was like, okay, I understand the basics of this thing. But when this thing stops working, everyone's going to feel a lot of pain because you happen to be gone. And there was one error that nobody else knew how to troubleshoot.
Right.
And so I found that those capabilities almost like seem to be better utilized for like these just like connections. Like when you're like 90% of the way there, and the 10% that you need something, a little script or something that's going to send data back and forth from one system to another, that you with a low or no code tool or with a SaaS management platform or something, you can build 90% of it or 80% of it, but you just need somebody who can come in, who has the technical chops to build the remaining 10, 15% of it. And then that's a small, not super sophisticated piece that's more easily maintainable.
Right. And you're talking about the sort of like custom integration type of stuff, right? Like Better Cloud had a module that, you could basically like plug in the different variables and like write your own data transformation scripts and stuff like that. But like the infrastructure that it stood on was like abstracted away from you. And so like you didn't have to worry about it. That's the kind of thing you're talking about, right?
Yeah. And even outside of SaaS management platforms, just like
Octa
trying to get my data from, trying to get my data from one place to another. I'm clicking around and like drag and dropping things and whatever. And then I'm like, this thing doesn't look right. Or this system is expecting the data to be in a certain different format. Mm-hmm. I find that you also said something in a previous episode, I think, that made me think about, like, I find myself often in the situation, I think you've probably found yourselves in similar ones, where like there's like such a small thing that needs to be done in order to like make it successful, but like it's like just out of the realm. It's just like just annoying enough or just hard enough, and I'm just don't quite have enough time where like if that thing exists, it can be such a huge barrier. Mm-hmm. Whereas if somebody can come in and take care of that, then I'm like, great. Like there's so many times where I was like, man, this would be really cool if this worked, but like, I really just don't, I don't have the time to figure it out. Nobody else on my team has the time to figure it out. And then like somebody would be like, hey, by the way, it took me 5 minutes to figure this thing out because I knew those skills. And now like the dam is released and all of the water comes flowing down. And well, I guess that's a bad thing.
For a long time, actually, that's how I felt about VLOOKUPs.
I was just about to mention VLOOKUPs. I was thinking of the very same thing, Rose. Yeah, that is one of the best skills to learn.
I still don't. I still don't know how to build a pivot table. I should do that.
Rose, I now know how to do a VLOOKUP without looking it up first. Mm-hmm. Like I can do it from memory now.
Those first few are painful. They're so painful.
Wait until you get to XLOOKUPs. They're even better. Then you don't have to worry about your having your data in the right order. You can do it.
Yeah, I'm good. I've done VLOOKUPs and I've done HLOOKUPs, which I think is like, that's pretty good, right?
Yeah.
I will say I got stuck on a COUNTIF last weekend, and I was like, I don't know why this isn't working, but I'm not going to figure this out. But like I guess that's the kind of thing, right? Too. Like I've also had that happen with like an app script, right? Where I'm like, I don't know why this one thing won't do what I want it to do, but I don't have time to figure it out. I don't have skills to figure it out. Like other things.
Well, it gets into that build versus buy conversation, and ultimately, I think there's you made a point before that was like, you should. I think Rose, you had said like you should only be building things that are like core to your product if your company makes a product.
How did that go when you worked at a SaaS management platform?
Well, thankfully, everything that we could build was like related to the product, basically. Like it was actually an interesting conversation because we would have that conversation way more frequently.
Yeah.
Where
I was going to say, surely you guys must have built
something
at some point or needed to build something at some point that like they could have put in the product.
Yeah,
right?
There'd be a lot of internal itches that needed scratching. And it's like, this is a problem for us. It's got to be a problem for all of our users as well.
Well, and I would say that was I think that was the most interesting and sort of overarching thing about my role and my job and my experience there that is a little different than some folks working in IT, is that we were the target audience for our own product. So, it was sort of self-serving occasionally because we could say, well, we want, like, we want this, therefore it must be something that our product should be able to do. But also it would be, we'd have these conversations about like, should we build, should we buy? We would build things. I think generative AI and ChatGPT and all of those things accelerated, like sort of like tipped the scale a little bit more towards the build column, because it was like, it's a accelerator for somebody who, like me, who is like, doesn't have a background in coding.
Those little things that you may not have quite
I can figure, I can work my way around things, or I can have it generate something and I can figure out enough, or working back and forth with it to like figure out where the error was and to implement some kind of solution. But then we would build more things than I think is maybe typical, because we would say, well, like, okay, so this is a thing that we're doing literally to manage SaaS applications, or we're solving user requests, or we're doing, we're automating some portion of a process here. And anything that we do in pursuit of that is potentially valuable to customers, is potentially something that we can put into the product. And we did have some of those things become successes, and we were able to also get, I mean, not as many as I'd like, but we were also able to provide feedback about it internally and say like, okay, it's great, we have this vision of what it's going to do, but when you click here, it only loads this many things, and if you refresh the page, it changes the pagination and all this stuff, and like that makes me not want to use this on a daily basis, no matter what the vision is, and then that would get fixed, right. And that was the coolest part.
That's good. It's good to know the pain points that we as other admins, because I was a user for a long time, we were having, also you were having as well, and we're able to advocate to get some things fixed internally. That's very good.
So when we were talking about having you on the show, Brian, I remember I recounted to Colin one of the light bulb moments I had one of the times. You gave a talk sometime about like how y'all used Better Cloud, the product. And I remember like one of the light bulb moments for me was just something as simple as like how y'all named your automation workflows. Right? Because you had this numerical system that you used to like how to track like daisy chain workflows.
Well, that's because there was no folders.
That was one of the there was no folders or anything like that. But I just remember like thinking like what an incredible sort of organizational idea, right? That just like would have never occurred to me as like I moved from a 3 workflow environment to a 20 plus workflow environment, right? And so like I guess did you have some of those aha moments like for yourself too, where you were like oh, like I could be doing this in a way that is so much more effective as you mature through SaaS ops it's a journey. It's not a destination, right?
Yeah, and I think that example too, even like naming conventions, pretty sure we got that from somebody else. Like so there's no original ideas or whatever, but I think like that was an instance of something that it's like one of those best practice type things where you just like see that and you're like, oh yeah, like how do you do this? Like that'd be really cool. And then we do it, and then because I think we would think about. I think that the challenge sometimes is. You only come up with those solutions when you actually have the pain in the first place. So you think about what it will take to scale, but it isn't until you do scale that you're like, ooh, I really wish we had done this a little differently. And then like in some cases you can go back and correct them. In some cases you can hopefully learn from others who have scaled before you and implement some of those things. Naming conventions is a good one. Organization that like even just as I was at the company for a longer period of time and like my responsibilities changed, I was like, I had this like moment of, I don't know all of the things that happen, like that work and how they're connected in this system anymore. And I used to be that I knew everything in my head.
Right. I knew every single piece of it. And now I don't.
Yeah, and I guess documentation is really important here. And other things like, taking like moving beyond what somebody like ClickOps, what somebody said, using GUIs. I think that is a different. You see that challenge also, where when you're trying to manage systems, more than one system or systems at scale, you can't just spend all of your time clicking through interfaces. And because for a couple of reasons. One, it can be inefficient if you're trying to do things in batches. And two, what happens when something changes that you don't know why it changed or something goes wrong? So now you also have to know this like audit log very well of each system and where it is and which audit log shows you the data you're looking for and who the actor was.
Yeah.
And so, and then how do you revert those changes? So I think even practices like infrastructure as code, like one of the things that we saw was how, I think at one point we saw, you can manage Okta and even I think Google Workspace with like Terraform, some aspects of it. I saw somebody else who had started experimenting with that. Yeah. And it was like, so we could actually have all of this managed in code, have it documented. And then that has multiple benefits of, well, now we don't have to wonder about what this thing is. We can revert changes if we need. We can see exactly who made those changes, and we don't have to learn every facet of every individual system in order to make it work. And it's the benefit of like it's kind of more forward-thinking technology, upskills the team, that type of thing.
Change management and auditing and going through the logs is incredibly difficult, even in Google Workspace and all the SaaS platforms. Yeah,
and that's gotten so much better.
Yeah,
too.
it's got the logs have got better, but sometimes I find it's got worse in knowing which log to look at to find out what you need to investigate.
It also depends on the system.
Yeah,
it's just like I think because the SaaS environment is such a just ever-changing world, like, some certain things get better, like, Google Workspace has gotten better, but like, for example, like there are still very consumer-focused apps that are becoming more popular in business, I think, like, which is a process that, it just happens when it happens.
Yeah.
But like, I think my most recent experience is like Canva. Have you ever managed Canva for Teams?
Yes.
It's fucking miserable.
Yeah.
LastPass, managing LastPass is
and after they had a
as
data
well.
breach.
That's got a terrible UI. It's a nightmare.
Yeah.
So,
and like very little auditing and like, it was funny because we just like set up like a Canva for Teams like environment. We, claimed our domain and all that stuff. We ended up with like a bunch of different teams, but no way to manage them. Like no way to delete the ones that aren't needed and like all of the stuff.
And those end up all being like upsell features then too, which is the hill that I will die on is like this isn't a feature of your product. You're trying to sell me a basic security feature and charge more for it. I will allow you to charge more for your product.
I don't want.
Yeah. I will not accept you to charge more for something that every thing should have.
Yeah.
Like it is the same thing
also,
with
you can't have there's certain things where I'm like, you can't have a business license without the ability to do some of this stuff. Like you can't call it a business license, right? Or like a professional license. I'm like, this is not professional. This is not business. Like business means oversight, right? It means like you're doing this for a company, not you're doing this for yourself.
It's a shame there are no international standards for this stuff, but I am sure a lot of these
Wouldn't it be nice?
These SaaS startups are very happy that there isn't an international or an IEEE, standard for SaaS management and applications. I've got a question I'd love to ask Brian as we get towards the end of our time. Let's say a company who is slow to SaaS have just re-emerged from a time machine. They're on Active Directory. They realize they've got an Office and an Active Directory.
He's really setting up a scenario.
Yeah, they've got they've got traditional workstations, Active Directory. They hire you as the IT director to transform them. So you have almost a blank checkbook and a greenfield domain to set up the organization. What technology stack would you use, and what would that look like, and
question.
How would you manage it?
Yeah, like what's your Nirvana stack?
Yeah, Utopia. Utopia.com.
Can I like brainwash the users into modern ways of thinking, or do I have to
let's assume these users are incredibly open to change?
Yes. And also you work with a very skilled partner and a very skilled change management leader who's able to help you with any of that stuff.
Yeah, and a great comms team.
That's that's amazing. I think hopefully AI can do some of that work for me. I think I would say we're going to burn all of these servers and on-prem environments. We're either going to sell the office or turn it into more of a real collaboration space, or something that gives an advantage to people who come in because they can't do something else at home, with modern video conferencing that I'm praying doesn't use Crustron in any way, so that myself and my team can actually manage rooms and replace hardware ourselves.
All right. So what's
I'm glad you said that.
So start laying out the tech stack. What would be the identity? What would be the collaboration platform? What would be your security? What would be MDM?
Well, gosh, can I even say that the identity would be Okta right now? Is that it's a
controversial choice, Brian, but it is an industry standard. So
that's the thing. It's you could argue every company is going to get breached, and you just need to make sure that you've established proper controls on your end, and that you can't just zero trust isn't just you don't trust nothing, but you kind of have to be very zero trust goes a long way here. You gotta make sure, even when you're getting your own vendors, you have to take your precautions. And I would say make sure that you get your data. Make sure your data is portable, and make sure that you can take it with you. But I'd probably pick Okta, or perhaps I would re-examine the competitors at the moment. Google Workspace. If I was managing Macs and PCs, I'd probably want to. I don't know. I'd probably go with Jamf or Kanji for Macs, and probably Intune for PCs, because is anything else going to be less painful?
Yeah, fair enough.
Like I said, Google Workspace already. Office 365. I've wiped out the concept of Outlook from people's brains in this scenario. There's some others. I guess Slack. Should we just use Discord now, or what's the new disruptive chat?
I don't know. You're not going to use.
Well, so I think we're divided actually. So I'm a Slack person, but I also use Discord. I don't use Discord for business though. Colin doesn't like Slack.
I like their fair usage billing model.
And that's we just talked about they're taking that away.
But no, I think for chat, if you're paying for Office 365, you should use Teams. If you're paying for Google Workspace, you should use Google Chat. So what would you use for your?
You're saying it's not worth paying a third party.
It's the same for if you're on Office 365, you use Teams for video conferencing. You don't pay for Zoom, and use Google Meet if you're on Office. If you're on Google Workspace,
but people do pay for Zoom on both of those.
Yeah, and obviously I did say you had a blank check, so you're going to pick the best of breed. So what would you use for your email and calendar?
Google Workspace.
I think Google Workspace. Yeah, seems better, more modern.
So.
Also much better at simultaneous collaboration for writing documents and creating presentations.
So Okta into Google Workspace, Jamf or Kanji for Mac. If you had to choose between the two, which one would you choose?
It's a great. If it was just me and I had no team, I don't know. I think I would want to play around with Kanji. I feel like they've cut into kind of a niche of a very crowded MDM space. To be able to differentiate yourself, especially within Mac management, is kind of impressive. And they handle a lot of, I think, app updates and identity in a way that doesn't require you buying several extra products, and a bit more seamlessly than Jamf. But Jamf is super powerful. Okay. So, I think I'd probably start out with Kanji.
Right. And for the Windows, obviously you're going to need a mixed environment. You said Intune, even though you need to have an Azure AD P2 license and all the other bits that go with that.
Yeah, that gets into some dark waters there. Has somebody here used what's it called? It's the cross-platform one.
Workspace one?
No. Oh,
There's JumpCloud,
no.
which does some MDM.
Oh, yeah, JumpCloud.
Yeah, for both.
Because doesn't JumpCloud do identity also for
It does.
for
Yeah,
both?
like I think it's interesting. JumpCloud's in a weird niche because like their whole thing is replacing Active Directory, but like they're a weird mix of MDM plus identity platform, right? So yeah. I will say like if you have somebody who like knows PowerShell really well, like you could do everything you needed to do on JumpCloud.
Good to know. Probably wouldn't. Well, maybe I would if I had a blank check, but I'd probably have them. I would probably want to get somebody who is doing something more interesting than just writing PowerShell scripts for integrating providers.
Yeah. And I was gonna say with Jamf and stuff, like you can design like whole UI interfaces and things. So, Colin, you had but before we end, we wanted to end on a funny note, and you had a domain story for us.
Oh, yes, yeah. And sorry for all the cat shenanigans earlier on. So I missed it. So yeah, we were talking about getting domain names and companies that
and Colin's habit of hoarding them.
Yeah, I may have a few, but it's like you would.
I managed like 400 domain names at Cloud, which hopefully I kept like non-renewing them every time I would see one come up. Sure. It's just like we would buy everything.
But yeah, I knew a company that wanted to use a new domain name. I looked it up on GoDaddy, found it had the details. Thankfully, they weren't using the proxy anonymizer to have a proxy address. So I had the Hotmail account, and I emailed the Hotmail account a few times from a nondescript Gmail account on my work account saying, hey, interested in buying your domain for a side project I'm doing. Can you sell it? Never heard anything back. Then I realized that the street address was there, and it was a place in Arizona. So I looked at the street address and zoomed in on Google Maps, and it was a store. So I went to the store's website, and I thought, let me look at their DNS. So I looked up their not their DNS, their who's information. Saw another domain was managing, that was the contact information for that domain. Then did another whois lookup on that domain, and lo and behold, it was the Hotmail address for the person that I had emailed originally who wasn't responding. So now I had like a true active address for him, was able to email him and then convince him to sell me the domain that they had so that we could use it in our company. But yeah, that was my sort of detective work.
That's how your pitch goes. You just email people and you're like, hey, I would really like to have this domain for a side project I'm doing.
Yeah.
It's not going to be profitable.
No,
at all.
it was.
This domain is not worth anything, so I would like to buy it for $20.
No. We did pay $1,500 for it, I think.
That's just relatively cheap.
But if he knew the company that wanted the domain, he would have probably charged $15,000 rather than $1,500.
What's the most you've ever bought a domain for?
Probably $40. Like some of the .life or the .club. I would never pay more than that.
Well, I mean,
no. Even in the course of your job,
at work.
In my course of my job. Oh, I think we spend at work like 10 or 12 grand.
I was going to say, 12 is the highest.
Oh, Brian's got a story.
What are you going to give us, Brian?
Let's do the Price is Right. What do we think? I'm going to go.
I think
6 figures.
87,000.
It's a very specific
I'm going to
number.
guess 6 figures.
Okay. Well, I don't want to disappoint you. The original price of the domain that I wanted to purchase while at work was $65,000. It dropped to $50,000 because there was a sale. But then I waited, and when the renewal came up, I believe somebody else bought it or something, or like somehow it got snatched, because when I checked again, like several years later, it wasn't available. And then, but I used a domain broker service, and I think we ended up getting it for like $12,000.
Wow.
Something like that. So
that's a pretty good
solid
discount. Yeah.
Was that domain ever used? I'm not
100%
sure if it was used, but that was not part of my responsibility there.
I bet it's either one of the .community domains or one of the .cloud domains.
I might tell you. Maybe I'll never tell my secrets.
Well, it's been wonderful talking to you, Brian, finding out your history and views on SaaS management and managing SaaS management platforms while inside a SaaS management platform company.
Colin, you did so good for most of the episode.
I did.
And then you came right back around.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I really appreciated catching up with you. It's been so good to see your faces. I really miss them.
Until next time, stay well, and make sure, everybody, you sanitize your HAR files before uploading them to a support site.
And don't let people sign into their personal accounts in Chrome.
Wait, what?
Yeah, that's how it happened.
Supposedly,
right? They signed into their they signed into their personal account, which prompted them to save the service account's credentials into their personal Chrome profile.
Oh, that's
and
what
then,
they did.
Like,
that's
okay.
what
I
the
used multiple
story
Chrome
is.
profiles, but they were using their personal profile for work.
But they didn't block like non-domain sign-ins in Chrome. But then they could have just used Edge or something.
Yeah. It's
Enterprise browser security. Please review our previous episodes.
Yes. Yeah.